This is a series called What Matters, and in which I cover the key takeaways from the developments that are happening all around us, reading the press releases, reports, articles, opinions, thoughts, research papers, and so on and so forth, and try and summarize them in my own understanding, my own ponderances, questions, some opinions, some thoughts, and so on. So, in this, I'm going to try and cover a couple of topics, a couple of different websites that I reach out and read from. I would enlist all the different videos that I would combine, which would be in the form of probably an index that would help with the timeline. You would you know fast forward to that particular section or continue watching the whole video. That'd be great. And that's that. Let's cover a couple of topics that have happened today or in this week. So we've all we're all aware of the rampant problems that one faces as a traveler, especially air traveler, in terms of different jurisdictions, different countries have different cultures, different practices, laws, and there are times when the airlines do not live up to the brand that they promise, and travelers, in the rush, in the absence of time, they end up facing a lopsided, one-sided decision making and service at the behest of the airlines. So it only becomes imperative that there is a set of rules that are brought about to ensure consumer protection and their rights and privileges, and especially some basic promises are met with, and there is some check on the abuse, especially, and we've seen it all that during the holiday seasons, because of the high volumes, understandably though, but high volumes, the preparation on the part of the airlines could sometimes fall short, deliberately or otherwise. It's not, it's anyone's guess. But the point being, the consumer who's paying for the services should get what they're, what they deserve. Having said that, so EU is always a step ahead in the regulations domain. So they've come up with some new proposals for passengers, improved rights, and easier access to travel information. So this is the press release, and I'm just going to go through all the key points that are there from this particular development. So it's merely a proposal as of now, and I'm sure this will move into the regulation phase pretty soon. It enforces mechanisms and improves rules for reimbursements for passengers and improvements to the following topics essentially. And this is important. This is quite interesting as well, that they're paying heed to all these avenues and aspects, which are mostly the trouble parts. People with disabilities traveling by air, if the airline obliges them to travel accompanied, the person accompanying them would travel free of charge. Uh, Makes a lot of sense. And well, if the airline is not arranging for some support, then it only is fair that there is some sort of a compensation or subsidy or support that the person who's forced to accompany the person who needs help, they kind of are reimbursed. So that's a good one. The intermediaries now, travel agencies, we know the hassles of travel agencies, the operators, the portals, aggregators, and all that. There's always this confusion as to who will reimburse in case of a refund, and so on and so forth. So there has to be a clarity as to who would reimburse the transport operator, or who would reimburse the consumer, the traveler, whether it's the transport operator or the intermediary. Thankfully, I mean, that kind of puts away a lot of hassle that happens in case of delays, refunds, cancellations, and so on. Unforeseen circumstances, like recently, there was a lot of hassle around the news of Iceland, the volcanic anticipated volcanic eruption, and because of which a lot of travel plans changed for people. Then there's this multimodal journeys where you have to change the transport or use different types of transport. Then they'll be entitled to better information protection. I have in particular in person not experienced this, so but if you have, and if you know somebody who has had, this should help them in certain way. I'll have to find more details around what and how this part works out. If you have any comments, let me know. Prepayments for travel packages at the time of booking or down payment. So we've experienced this part, right? Prepayments, especially the ones who dealt with packages, travel packages. So there is prepayment, and the proposal is to limit a max of 25% of the package price up to 28 days before departure. That kind of prevents the. It actually is fair on both sides. Actually, there is a prepayment requirement because obviously you are booking for somebody, but you know you're putting a reasonable price on that. You can't be like putting the 100% down payment or prepayment or I mean, anything above 50% in my mind is anyways unfair, but 25% is generous, a little generous on the consumer side, but I mean, I would take it any day. Refund through vouchers, refund through vouchers, automatic refund if not used before the end of the validity period, and protection against travel company insolvency. Excellent. I think we saw this in certain parts of the in certain parts of the world where Thomas Cook was there, I believe. It's been some time, but I don't remember. But this does happen that the travel company itself went under, and people who had booked quite expensive packages just lost everything. So refund vouchers, and especially notably the automatic refund if not used before the end of the validity period. Makes sense. If the refund voucher is not being used, might as well just refund it, and not wait on your consumer to end up losing all the money. It's in your interest as well as a brand that you take care of your customers. So great initiative and great thought on this one, and to include this in the proposal. The right to get refunded within 14 days is a refund. I believe this is already there, and they're just trying to enforce and give it the priority that it is required. You cannot wait on refunds beyond a certain period of time. So easier access to transport data for both businesses and passengers, and proactively monitoring travel issues in response to complaints. So these are the key highlights, and very much expected, anticipated, and required. Hopefully, other countries emulate these and incorporate these, or even better rules and regulations in the favor of customers and passengers and citizens. Meanwhile, in case you're traveling in and around Europe or European Union, there's this website. You can search your Europe website page, whereby you can get all your answers apparently on your rights and privileges when you're traveling into the European Union and around. So that's that. And what's next? Let's see. Talking about global connectivity and interconnectedness, there's something that is being talked about a lot, especially since COVID, is global supply chains. So there's this press release by the White House on President Biden's new actions to strengthen America's supply chains and ensuring lower costs and securing key sectors. So apparently there are 30 new action points in this Bidenomics agenda, part of Bidenomics agenda, and the intent is to strengthen and make the supply chains robust enough to support the economy, because it's the fundamental banking, it's a fundamental part of a strong economy, especially for a large country like US. It is key to have resiliency in the supply chain as a priority. There is a supply chain disruptions task force that is being established, which would oversee the resiliency and the risk areas of the supply chains globally and domestically. The key sectors that have been included through the CHIPS Act and the Science Act, or even in the Inflation Reduction Act, this has been talked about. There's an acknowledgement that the supply chain pressures existed, though they have declined from October of 2021 to 2023, and so has inflation, officially, as part of the press release. On ground level, the situation might be what it might be. The creation of the Council on Supply Chain Resilience inauguration meeting has held, and they've made a council which will be co-chaired by the National Security Advisor, National Economic Advisor, and the Secretaries of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Energy, Human Services, Homeland, Housing, State, Labor, Transport, Treasury, and so on, Environment and Trade representatives and other senior officials. So pretty powerful committee, so as to a council, so as to look into this very key matter of supply chain. They're going to use the Defense Production Act to mitigate drug shortages and provide essential medicines, broader powers or authority to Department of Health and Human Services, domestic manufacturing of essential medicines essential to national defense. We are all aware of the pressures on the medical or health sector in US, and it's only brought to the absolute forefront by COVID and its fallout, whereby there was immense pressure on hospitals and supply chains of medicines and so on. So this Defense Production Act, I think it is being stretched even beyond the emergency that was imposed during COVID, and certain more authorities are being given to the departments under this. Resilience of medical product and critical food supply chains are going to be looked into. The Department of Defense will also soon release a new report on pharmaceutical supply chain resilience aimed at reducing reliance on high-risk foreign suppliers. Now, that's a very, very important development. I'm not sure how the pharma stocks reacted to this particular press release, but looks positive for domestic pharma companies because there will be a focus, there will be some sort of subsidies coming in, hopefully, or not. But there is a focus clearly on pharmaceutical supply chain resilience, and there is an acknowledgement, a subtle acknowledgement to the reliance on high risk pharma suppliers over here. I think that's a slight remark to Chinese suppliers or other countries as well. Data sharing capabilities have to be improved upon. The Department of Commerce will set up a supply chain center integrating industry expertise and data analytics, collaborating with the Department of Energy to deep dive into clean energy supply as well. And there's again an acknowledgement of foreign dependencies and vulnerabilities and points of failure for critical drugs. So a lot of focus coming in on that, and that also as seen on the ground level and in terms of the prices of certain drugs that have skyrocketed or have extortionist price tags on them compared to the same drugs probably be available in other countries at a fraction price of what is available in the US. So that's that. Department of Transportation freight, is going to look into a freight logistics optimization works flow program and bringing about a public-private partnership to help the supply chain stakeholders create a common picture of supply chain networks, avoid bottlenecks and competitive freight network. Clearly, they are competing with the big supply chain providers and shipping companies. That's what is being looked into by providing a competitive freight network that is US based, which can take over or look after global supply chain as well. Department of Agriculture to increase data transparency for containerized shipments of agricultural products, to avoid spoilage, reduce wastage, and increase efficiencies in the supply chain and avoid disruptions when food prices bear the direct impact of supply and demand, which trickle down to the common people, and they have to end up shelling out more money for the same amount of you know groceries. Well, there's more focus on affordable, reliable energy and critical technology, and I'm sure they're going to refer to AI, advanced manufacturing, recycling grant program to subsidize communities that are affected by coal mine and coal power plant closures by investments in clean energy supplies. This is a good initiative. I mean, we've been seeing that a lot of bipartisan debate or partisan debate happening on and around clean energy versus fossil or traditional forms of energy. And while there have been actions taken on closures of plants, coal plants, and so on, but there were not enough clear subsidies, that help the common people who are getting affected in terms of the clean energy that you're talking about, supply chain. And if that's the case, then if the people are getting reimbursed or subsidized for their losses, then there might be a positive move that will bring some consensus and remove some divisions that have really got entrenched, including production of critical minerals, critical materials. And we've seen this. Biden has almost been on the road trying to reach out to Vietnam and other countries, and Australia, and which essentially has been to secure critical minerals for EV batteries and other critical military-based products, because there is a supply chain dependency on foreign countries for these critical materials. So that's an acknowledgement. A lot of money is going to trickle down into these initiatives, allotted to these initiatives. Bipartisan infrastructure law to boost domestic production of advanced batteries, domestic food supply chains, opportunities for farmers and entrepreneurs in about 37 states, and USDA, Department of Agriculture, is going to look into this initiative. Fertilizer production and farmer income opportunities. National Defense Industrial Strategy on policy development, investment, and defense industrial base. Uh, Suppliers and sub-suppliers, they're going to look into and focus on sub-suppliers as well, which is basically talking about small business owners. There will be a supply chain review that is going to be done to update criteria to keep up with times, which is a very good point included over here, because generally we talk about certain initiatives taken, and there is, as one would know from project management principles, that there is some critical aspect called monitor and review as well. So reviewing the criteria 1 year down the line will provide contemporary issues, contemporary developments to be included into that supply chain review. So this is great. Define as critical annually. The review might happen quadrennially or annually as suitable, and update the list of critical sectors at that point in time. So a commodity which is critical to today might fall down on the list of 1 to 3 ranking, and some other critical material might be in short supply at that point in time. So it's always good to review that and keep updating. Department of Energy, again, they would have Advanced Materials Manufacturing Technologies Office, Smart Manufacturing, Digital and Artificial Intelligence. There you go, which will have a lot of focus on productivity and security of manufacturing systems. New capabilities to monitor existing and emerging risks. What are these risks? The risks are in terms of threats and vulnerabilities on inside US ports. We've seen that happen around last year, whereby a lot of uh, disruption happened on the West Coast ports because of the breakdown in terms of the flow of goods and containers, and it created quite a backlog and jam in the Pacific. Well, that affected a lot of that did have a trickle down effect on the economy and prices of items. Uh, Multimodal trade office, climate impacts, National Security Council will include the interagency efforts with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration to monitor global developments such as El Nino, global commodity prices, agriculture and fisheries outputs, and the impacts of climate change on food security, human health, and social instabilities. Energy and critical mineral supplies by US Geological Survey will map the geospatial databases and focus on semiconductor components. Semiconductor is again a big focus right now because it's used everywhere in all aspects of life currently, and it's key to ensure the smooth movement in any economy in the world right now. That's the level of dependency on semiconductor, which again brings back the requirement for critical minerals and critical materials, and the dependency on certain foreign countries, which is considered a high risk, as mentioned in the press release. Launch a new criticalminerals.gov website. There you go. And supply chain mapping tool to analyze supplier data for the 110 weapon systems by DoD. They will be looking into this, which again highlights how risky the whole geopolitical scenario right now is. That there is a lot of focus on the defense materials as well, because of again the dependency on keeping your supplies in place, robust and in solid state. Supply Chain Data Analytics Summit will be by Department of Commerce, convened by Department of Commerce, will bring public and private stakeholders together in inviting expert inputs to supply chain risk assessment models and tools. Because of the new developments that are happening, the tools and models need to be updated as well to keep abreast of the latest developments, especially in AI and semiconductors. Limitations and actions to improve. There needs to be more transparency to highlight and not brush under the carpet the limitations of the drawbacks, and not getting lost in the whole division of politics as to what are the shortcomings, and really looking into them and improving them. AI hackathons by DARPA, coming out with these 2022, they had a prize challenge developing novel artificial intelligence approaches and to assess domestic critical mineral resources, risk mapping for labor right issues, address the issues around child labor and forced labor risks. They also want to look into deep down on the supply chains of cobalt and cotton sectors. We've seen, and this has come out in certain books and reports as well, that the cobalt supply had some or quite grievous human rights issues. So Department of Labor would be overseeing and looking into these so as to eradicate that in their supply chain from the supply chains for US and possibly the globe. Deepening international early warning systems, again coming back to climate change, this is essential for supply chains disruption to be risk assessed, that we have early warning systems to ensure, especially for critical food items and minerals, that there is an early warning in case there is an anticipated disruption. Let's suppose, like recently that happened for certain storms that were anticipated on the eastern coast. Uh, European Union partnerships with European Union, Japan, Republic of Korea, and Mexico and Canada with the USMCA agreement, maintain regional trade flows enduring emergencies. So they've ensured global partnerships across geographies. US EU Trade and Technology Council with Japan and Republic of Korea. There's this trilateral summit that happened at Camp David to identify priority products and integrate their supply chains. With Australia, Canada, European Union, Japan, United Kingdom, and World Health Organization, the Global Regulatory Working Group on Drug Shortages meets quarterly to discuss product shortages. Global partners, President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation, Resiliency, Prepare, climate observation capabilities, and data sharing are in focus. actionable local, regional, and global climate information, minimize impacts upon infrastructure. Uh, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity (IPF) supply chain agreement, uh, cold chain services, semiconductors, and critical minerals, crisis response network, joint crisis simulations, promote worker rights. North American Leaders Summit, Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investments. Uh, they're trying to develop a Lobito corridor connecting Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia with global markets through Angola. Indian Middle East Europe corridor, economic corridor to facilitate trade and clean energy. Global Labor Directive advancing worker empowerment rights and labor standards globally. Mineral security partnerships with a wide variety of geography and countries. Australia, Canada, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, India, Japan, Norway, Republic of Korea, Sweden, United Kingdom, and European Union countries. And International Technology Security Innovation Fund to diversify global semiconductor supply chain and examine the risks and interdependencies and collaborate. So that's quite an initiative. It's a very wide initiative. Looks like a plan coming from an administration that's probably looking for a second term, frankly, if not prepare the country without divisions and look for something that could sustain the growth and supply chains for the nation. That's something that's critical, and other countries kind of should come up together on this and collaborate so as to bring about the economies of scale and benefits mutually with these partnerships that have been enlisted here. Uh, well, that's that. That's the America Supply Chain Initiative announced by, and the new actions around it that's announced by Biden administration in the press release released on the White House website. All right, let's look into other things now. In another development, FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, adopts rules to protect consumers' cell phone accounts. Now, this is very interesting because given the amount of frauds, and this is mentioned even in the report and the press release, uh, which is available on the Communications Commission's webpage itself, it acknowledges the fact that the number of complaints that are being received for the fraud related to SIM card swaps and port out fraud has increased multiple folds apparently, and in the wake of which they had to update the laws or the rules that were set in around 1998 and 2007. Around between that, and that's what I was reading through in the report. It's quite a comprehensive report. It's available on the website, about 90 odd pages. So I just glanced through the key points mentioned in that. But before that, what this rule adopts or is proposing are certain changes in terms of the current authentication practices that the network operators are supposed to carry out for any such request um, to entertain any number portability or SIM card swapping that is there. Now, what happens is something which is very tricky, very technical. Of course, people, the bad actors, so-called, they are the ones who better understand it. But from our perspective as consumers, what is important and what matters really is the the importance and not taking it lightly, because the people who've suffered it suffer to the extent, and this is mentioned in the press release itself, that the bad actors can, during that time when the number portability is supposed to happen, or even otherwise, they can, based on certain data points such as PIN code or zip code, such as previous bill payments, such as address or name and account number, they could authenticate themselves with a new provider stating or impersonating as a customer itself. And then the new provider would send a message of SIM portability to the current provider of that particular number. And in that loophole, because of such weak authentication, which is based on zip code and name and account number and all that, the current provider is obliged to comply with the portability request because of the number portability facility which is there, which anyways was brought about for the interest of the consumers, because that gives the consumers the choice to go about selecting the kind of network and prices that they want to. So keeps the market in check in terms of pricing and fairness to the consumers. But this loophole is being exploited. This is what this initiative talks about, and the changes they're trying to bring in for those authentication and procedural lapses or loopholes that currently exist. So the chairwoman, Jessica Rosen-Vercel, in her press statement, mentions of this, acknowledges of this rampant problem, which acknowledges the fact that the mobiles in today's date and age are everything. They contain all our data points, health, personal information, bank accounts, financial information, investments, contacts, photographs, passwords, and so on and so forth. It's a touch point which, if you hack once, gives access to almost everything. So in the SIM swapping scams in particular, this is of real concern, and Federal Bureau of Investigation reports SIM swapping scams are on the rise. So FBI also acknowledges this problem, and they're getting a lot of complaints whereby consumers have suffered a lot of losses, serious losses to the extent because once the bad actors get hold of the number, they change the passcodes, or they get access to emails by authenticating the email password change. Then they can get access to bank accounts, and then through the SMSs and one-time passwords, they can change or transfer funds and so on. So through this, they are trying to give wireless carriers and obliging them to give subscribers more control over their accounts. The most important thing that they're trying to bring in is that the carriers are supposed to give a notice of number portability request or SIM transfer request, if at all any bad actor has tried to play. The consumer should get a notice of the same. I don't know if it's supposed to come by mail, onto email, SMS, or whatever the means would be, but that's a very important point that should be there, and that is the kind of change they're proposing to bring in, so that it gets harder for the scam artists and so on. So that's the thing, and the rules that they're trying to upgrade are called. There are two rules in particular that there is an upgrade required. One is Commission's existing customer proprietary network information, which is CPNI, and the other one is local number portability rules, LNP rules. So those are the two ones which anybody wants to refer to. Please go ahead and internet search will provide you the answers for the Commission requires wireless providers to adopt secure authentication methods and to immediately notify customers of SIM change port out requests before they are processed, as we discussed. So this is going to be a very key important change. And the more important, just a few points from the report itself. It's a comprehensive report, again, 98 pages I pulled out. And the only few points which I kind of glanced through and caught my eye, important ones are the fact that there are certain baseline requirements that the proposal is emphasizing on when it comes to authentication of this or such a request, if ever be generated, not at the cost of creating more bureaucracy and hassles or unfair practices tried by network carriers, but in the interest of consumers' safety and privacy, which is of key importance here. To initiate a port between two wireless providers, a customer must provide certain identifying information, such as telephone number, account number, and zip codes, which to the new wireless provider. Given that this is very basic, this leads to the loophole, which provides the opportunity for the bad actors to exploit. The report acknowledges the fact again, and there are hundreds of customer complaints about SIM swap and port out fraud. Then the problem that creates is the wireless providers have refused to provide them with the documentation related to the SIM requests, the SIM change requests. Now, if the actual user is not able to get those documentation, in the absence of which they're not able to file or pursue any legal action, file complaint or pursue legal action against such an unfortunate development in their lives. And because of the delay, they end up losing far more, not just in terms of privacy and all, but also financially, because there have been cases where they've been scammed out of money. So beware of such things. And I think I've just been thinking, what is the way before this proposed rule really becomes an actual in force rule? Is I think there has to be a few things that one, as an individual, I can put in place, such as passcode to my account and or authenticating two-factor authentication if it already exists, like in Gmail and certain other email accounts, so that when an email comes in there, so the person is not able to change the password for that. Or even in the bank accounts, there are two-factor authentication these days. So I think those need to be put in place right away. Wireless providers use insecure authentication challenges. Again, that could be subverted easily by the attackers, so need to be very careful of that. But those are the important things which I kind of found in this report. And again, it's a very comprehensive report. If somebody wants to go through it, it might give you a lot of insights. If you're suffering from this problem, you should definitely read the rules and changes that they're trying to bring in. Maybe it will offer some help. Also, they must offer the customers the option to lock their accounts to block processing of SIM card changes and ports. Currently, if that's not the case, I mean, this is a little worrisome, because this should be in place so that the customers can right away, in the least, block the account so that nothing wrong proceeds from that point onwards. And then customer gets some time to take some recourse or action towards it. So this is a very interesting development that FCC is trying to bring in, and it's very important, much required, much awaited. That's that, and hopefully we'll be able to safeguard ourselves against the bad actors as always. But that's another one. Let's see what we have got next. In another event called the New York Times Deal Book Summit, interesting event where business, politics, and culture all connect and come together. A lot of eminent personalities dropped by, and among them VP Kamala Harris, President of Taiwan, Elon Musk, FTC Chair Lena Khan, and so on. But I think the most important, the ones that stood out for me would be, and specifically the few things that they said would be JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon and NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. So Jamie Dimon being Jamie Dimon, I mean, he's quite candid of late. And the couple of things which he said that were key. I mean, I didn't get the chance to go through the whole interview, but the important things were that he acknowledges the importance of China in the geopolitical scenario and global world order in general. So he kind of defended his position to have business and investment in China. Uh, it's obviously a strategic investment that, as a bank, he's got there. He acknowledges the supply chain dependencies that US has uh, in China in per se, besides other countries, much like China has dependencies, for instance, energy-based dependencies on other countries. So it's quite entangled, this whole global economy in that sense. And there is a need to fix this dependency, is what he's emphasized on. And I mean, we can see that the kind of efforts that are being made currently to re-energize the whole economy in US and detach from that dependency is going on. But it's a considerable effort, and we'll circle back to what NVIDIA's CEO later says in terms of the dependencies, especially on the semiconductor forefront. Uh, but while the host tried to grill Jamie Dimon on one of the questions of investment in ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, he tried to kind of dodge it by taking support or taking cover behind the so-called process of due diligence, and that it would self-correct if there be any non-compliant business, then such relationship would not last and would not be continued. But uh, I mean, not directly addressing the concerns that were expressed by the administration in US regarding the privacy of data and misuse and all that. Nevertheless, he does agree that, and he said he's not afraid of China per se, but he wants to engage because it's logical and makes business sense as a capitalist country running the biggest bank, probably, to engage in business with China and Chinese businesses. And uh, one of the things that he kind of pointed out is that war in Taiwan is a big no-no. All bets would be off. There would be huge depression on a global order, unlike we've seen apparently. So if that's what the case, and the fact that China is going to face severe impacts of that, mm, kind of gives a bit of a hope that people would be aware of such repercussions on both sides of the divided line. Mm, so it's good for business as well. I would say. I mean, nobody was going to bite that big bite, take that move, first move in that front. It's not similar. The situation is not similar to what happened in Ukraine and Russia or Israel, Gaza. Having said that, he acknowledges the need for better policies on immigration and trade and so on, and that divisiveness needs to stop. And the acceptance of alternate perspectives is where we need to come. He gave a couple of examples from Republican parties and Democrats. Uh, that's something I found really interesting, and that's the only thing that is key from that interview that one can think about. Coming to NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, the key statement that he made was on the dependency that the US chipmakers have on Chinese supply chain, and that it would take at least a decade for gaining any sort of independence from that. That's I think very key statement coming from the CEO of one of the leading AI chip makers in the country. Having said that, one has to be mindful of the fact that this might come from a person and a place or a company which faced the adverse outcome of the export control rules that US came out with recently, because of which Nvidia suffered certain restrictions in terms of its trade and sales with China. So it could be a cited reproachment or a slight or a remark based on that there is a bit of exaggeration of 10 years or a decade worth of timeline to gain independence from China's supply chain. But who's to say? I mean, it's quite integrated, it's quite complicated and entangled. On a best case scenario, it could not be, a 50%, 100% exaggeration. So maybe let's say even 5 to 6 years of timeline is quite considerable in that manner. So that's the key takeaway from his interview. And he did express his opinions and assessments like everybody else in the AI domain right now have, in terms of the growth that AI is uh, is going to experience. It's exponential. Nobody's talking about linear anymore. Nobody is talking about even you know uh, anything less than exponential. So the growth is going to be exponential. The changes that it's going to bring about in within this coming decade, are something that every leader by now has emphasized upon. So that's that. I still have to catch up on what Elon Musk said. I did read a couple of statements coming in on Twitter, but X, but that's on a different topic, and then it's regarding that whole furor about what he said regarding anti-Semitic remarks and all that. But did he say anything on the business front or not? We have to check out the interview. This was NY Times Dealbook Summit that happened today, I believe. With that, that's a wrap. Whatever more would come my way, I would read and share the key takeaways at the earliest possible. Well, let me know any feedbacks, thoughts, comments, any other things that you have in mind, and let's keep this conversation going. All right, thank you.